Okay. I think we
And
established that.
I'm sorry that you didn't get to use all of that footage of me being aggravated.
Well, we got a little bit of it. We got a tiny bit of it, but
I'm
no, it was
sure that you could get me to that state again. You don't have any problem doing that. And I feel that it's something you're good at with probably anybody. And you probably don't even do it on purpose.
are you semi-analyzing me now, Mark?
No, I'm insulting you.
Oh, okay. Should I be honored that we've gotten there that quickly? I mean, I assume we'd get to ball busting eventually.
Well, I mean, the fact that you didn't even realize I was doing it is sort of problematic, but
Um, well, I mean, should we start with like how we know each other? Should we start there?
it's your show.
All right. I'd like to start with how I know you.
Okay.
This is my earliest recollection. You ready?
Yeah.
So we'll get that out there. I'm sober, you're sober, both sober a long time. We're both out about it, so it's okay. We can break each other's whatever.
Yeah.
And uh, once upon a time, I was a stand-up. I was in Los Angeles. It was 2002,
Mm,
and
right.
I ran this little room in a billiard hall,
Yeah.
Hollywood Billiards,
Right.
and somebody introduced me to Mishna. I don't know who, but she came into the room.
My ex-wife. Yeah.
Who you were dating at the time, Mishna Wolf,
Yep.
and she had a little like her keychain was down, and she had a little coin. And I was like, "Oh, you're in the program." She said, "Yes," and um, she said, "Oh, well, Mark is too. He'd probably do your room. He's a nice guy. He'll probably come do it." And so you came and did it. Um, and then it's not like we were friends right away or anything, but we just started seeing each other around a little bit.
Yeah, I remember like that first time I met you when I came to do your room, and I'm sure I was kind of snotty, but I do remember that, you tucked your shirt in. You had a button-up shirt and you like tucked it in, I think. Is that possible?
Yes.
I was like, this dude's wearing a belt with a tucked in button-up shirt, man. Old school.
Well, I
And you
think
you know, you had sort of like kind of like a 80s, like, yeah, I'm the dude, man. I'm the guy. Like I kind of like, it's my room. Ladies like me.
yeah, that was well. So I started in Boston, I think, as you know, and everybody kind of did the sort of schlumpy t-shirt and jeans thing, and so I
Uh-huh.
thought I'm gonna stand out. I'm gonna like dress nice. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I couldn't
yeah,
afford, and I couldn't afford really nice clothes, but I
right,
had like my nice, I don't want to say Gap, but something that made me
right.
like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And I kind of thought that would,
Well, it worked. I remembered it. I don't I don't know if I thought like that guy's well dressed. I'm like, this guy's tucking his shirt in like it's the 70s.
it did kind of work though, right? People were like, "Oh
Yeah,
yeah, you're the guy that whatever." But no,
yeah.
I definitely thought I would say that I probably put too much on the looks, right? I probably
Uh-huh.
should have worked on the material more than trying to look sharp.
It's so weird because I'd forgotten that that was a pool place, but now I remember it. And you were kind of tucked in like to that area right when you walked into the place to the left. There was like a
Correct.
room, right? And then
Right.
the larger room with the pool table was a little further in.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, I remember. That's wild. I mean, that's like 18 years ago.
Well, and that's what's so great, by the way, of listening to you talk to comics, and especially the Boston comics, who I worked with all of them, Sweeney, Gavin, fucking all of them. You know what I mean? And
I have a hard time. It's hard for me to believe that you were there because I was there so much longer before you,
I
really.
know, dude, but those guys, but you have to understand that in '96, they were still the headliners. Boston doesn't move,
Oh,
man.
of course, of course. Yeah,
So,
Kevin Knox was still alive.
right?
Right. Yeah. And it was Gavin and Steve Sweeney and probably Lenny Clark was back by that point.
Yeah, Lenny wasn't nearly as big as he is now. He had just started to do little things, like he was in all the Farrelly Brothers movies, but he hadn't, like, whatchamacallit hadn't happened yet.
What hadn't happened?
The Fireman Show.
Yeah, but he was a big deal there earlier. He had his own
Right,
sitcom that didn't even run a full season, I don't think, in the late 80s.
right. Lenny.
But he was the guy. He was the guy in Boston.
Right.
There's that famous story about Bobcat Goldthwait. You know that story?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And obviously I was way after Bobcat. But most of those stories that you tell, like Chance, all those guys.
Chance,
And
sure.
And see, it just brings me back
To
in this
give people
cool.
the whole names for their listening, Chance
Oh,
Langton,
people don't know.
and
Right.
these are Boston comics, but the story about Bobcat Goldthwait and Lenny Clark was back in the 80s. Bobcat got the Letterman show, and he was really the first one out of that scene. This is before he left Boston to go to San Francisco. So he was the first one out of that scene to get the Letterman show. And he was from upstate New York, and he was a kid, really. So a lot of the old comics there, or the older comics, were pissed off, Lenny being one of them. And apparently he, at a comedy club, he threw Bobcat up against the wall and held him by his neck and said, "It's not your turn." That's Boston.
Right. Right.
And Lenny's brother, Mike, booked all the rooms. Like I used to do Mike Clark, he's booked Giggles out in Saugus. I remember when Giggles opened, the Leaning Tower of Pizza is the joint that it's at. I think it's on Route 1 in Saugus.
Route 1 in Saugus.
I was there like the first few weeks it opened. I was still in town then. But Mike Clark booked me on one of my first gigs ever being paid to do comedy. It was in Lowell, Massachusetts. But for me, it was like, that's where Jack Kerouac came from. I didn't think of it as like some dingy, kind of sad working class suburb at the time, or not even a suburb, its own town, but it was a dead mill town, I think. But I opened up there. It was a Mike Clark. It was at Derby Park, I think it was what it was called, the restaurant. And it'd been around for years by the time I did it. And I opened for Chris Shino. That was one of my first gigs.
I don't know who that is.
My second, I think right around the same time, another paying gig I got, Mike gave me one. That's interesting. I'm just remembering this really, because he gave me one before I came in second in the riot. But that's when I started working really. And that my recollection of the first gig I got after work, coming in second in the riot, was opening for Nick DiPaolo.
The comedy riots.
Agunquit, Maine.
Oh, I know that town, but it's interesting because I got there in '96, which, the first boom was long over, but people still talked about it.
Right. I was there for the kind of second boom.
Which was what years?
I don't know, man, because I came in, by the time I came in second in the riot in '88. So that's really it was like August, and that marks when I began doing comedy full time, where I didn't have another job.
Right.
It was August '88, and I have not had another job since then.
When you weren't,
that wasn't comedy related.
When you weren't washing dishes or making sandwiches or making coffee.
Right.
Because those were your previous jobs, correct?
Grill cook. I mean, we can raise it up a little bit. I did some grill cooking, short order cook.
Right.
Barista, pre-coffee explosion barista at the one place that was kind of like a snooty coffee joint in Harvard Square in the garage, the Coffee Connection, pre-Starbucks. But they used to serve all of their coffee, if you're going to drink coffee in-house, in a French press. That's the only way you could get it if you were going to sit down. You couldn't get a cup of coffee. You had like 30 different types of coffee from all over the world. And you
so who came in? Just students trying to be cool?
No, it was a popular place because like you could get coffee to take out that's just brewed out of the spigot. So it had a big business, but it was also had a little bit of a cafe thing. There's a weird dude that worked in the making the sandwiches there. But that's where I worked when I was washing dishes, when Louis saw me washing dishes and he decided that I was okay.
Louis C.K.?
Yeah.
Because you told that story where he saw you washing dishes and...
No, because literally when I was working there, I moved there back from LA after being fucked up on cocaine and hanging out with Keniston and thinking I was like the shit. And there I was, like, still bitter and angry. I'd been spit out of LA. I'd gone to rehab. And then I went to Boston to start over. So I was there to do comedy. But I'd already had that LA experience. I'd already been to rehab. But it didn't stick. I was like pissed off. And I had to have a job. So I was living in an attic in Somerville, in Davis Square. And I had a job at the Coffee Connection. And Catch a Rising Star, the Cambridge one, was right downstairs from the Coffee Connection. So that was my area. So one time Dave Cross and Louis came in, and Dave knew me, but Louis didn't really know me. And I mean, he tells this story, and they came in, and he thought I was kind of a dick, and they came in to have coffee, and I was back there fucking, washing dishes and loading up that machine, the restaurant style one where you open the door, slide the fucking rack in.
Oh yeah.
And Louis just says, like, when he saw me doing that, it somehow it humanized me somehow. I wasn't just this arrogant dick. I was like mad for a reason. And I was just there just trying to get by washing dishes. Fucking, and somehow or another it endeared him to me at the time.
For 4.25 an hour or whatever minimum wage
Yeah,
was back
whatever
then.
it was, and it was bad because you got all this free coffee and you're around it all day and it was going into your pores. I mean, there's literally coffee grounds everywhere. So after work, you'd steal coffee, bags of coffee. Like I was just coffeeed up all the time and I couldn't sleep. So I used to go, there were times where I'd be up in that attic in Somerville losing my mind. It was like a group house, a lot of different people lived there. And I would go back down to Harvard Square and sit around the Tasty. Do you remember the Tasty?
Yes.
It used to be that corner burger joint right in the Harvard Square. It was open like all night. And I
Right.
used to just sit there. It was like all they had was like a counter, like with 10 chairs and another, like maybe it fit 20 people. And I knew the guy that was flipping burgers there, and it was open like till all night. So I'd go back there and I'd sit there till like 3 a.m. just talking to Mike. It's crazy.
So it's interesting because that you sort of had your like these different starts in kind of like the best places to start comedy, right?
I was chasing it.
Right. But
It
I
was
mean like LA, San Francisco, and Boston, which is usually most people have a story of coming out of one of those towns, and you kind of came out of all three in some way, right?
Well, kind of, but San Francisco was, I think, probably ultimately looking back on it, the second most important. The thing was, it wasn't like it is today. Not every city had a comedy scene. Certainly not one you could make a living at. But back in the '80s, LA was not a great place to start because that's where show business was. And, you had to sort of get in at the ground level and work at a club and tour out of there. But it was for me, and I still think it's not a great place to start show business, or especially comedy. When you get to LA, you should have your shit together.
Right. Have your chops.
Yeah. But at that time in the '80s, there were only two other cities where you could live and make a living doing comedy. And that was Boston and San Francisco. Boston, that's why none of those guys left, dude. It had the entire comedy industry was built on one-nighters with three or four, or yeah, it's actually two or three subcontractors who would do gigs in bars and grills all around the New England area, right? So you could live there. When I started out after the riot, I'd get $75 to $100 to drive anywhere from an hour to 6 hours to open for another guy on a two-man show. But I could do it 3 or 4 times a week and make enough bread to, get me by. And when I left Boston, then I went to New York, and I was going back and forth from New York to Boston, trying to get on stage in New York. I couldn't get on stage there other than the Boston Comedy Club and the fucking old dying Improv. I couldn't get on at the Cellar. I couldn't get on at Catch. So I got to New York. I eventually relapsed on drugs. And I said, I was like, fuck this. I was losing my mind in New York on the Lower East Side. And I just loaded up my car and drove to San Francisco and chased a woman out there who I'd broken up with, landed on her doorstep, and then lived there for a couple years and kind of regrouped. Sort of started there as a strong middle, and then came in second in that competition, I guess in '94, and then was like, headlining from that point on. But those are really the cities that built me. God,
Well,
New York and Boston.
well, it's interesting because those guys,
Yeah, they all built me, Matt. Like I can't disregard the Sam Kinison time, being a doorman at the Comedy Store.
right. I feel like you've told those stories so many times, though I didn't want to make you rehash them. You know what I mean? Like I feel like
Well, no, I'm not. I don't need to go into the whole story, but like it was the process. Really was. I did a little stand up in college, but I wouldn't call it stand up. I would though. '84, man. When I was a sophomore, after my sophomore or junior year, I was in a team in college, a comedy team.
right. I think I remember you telling me that.
Me and Steve Brill. And then he graduated. So I guess it was my senior year. And I stayed and I started doing comedy solo in Boston and going to Play It Again Sam's, drinking like a fish and doing open mics in Boston for a summer before my senior year of college. And I was like, I can't hack this. waiting around all night. Like it was like in that basement up in Alston. But so after I graduated college, I went immediately to LA and then, did the doorman thing. And then I fucking hit the wall on drugs, went back to Boston, started over, got my chops, got started doing the half hour, the 45 minutes. Then I moved to New York, got shut out, was driving up to Boston every weekend to make a living, living on the Lower East Side, but I couldn't make a living in New York. So I'd drive up, stay at the chick's house in Somerville until her roommate said I couldn't stay there anymore because they hated me. I don't even know why. And and then eventually, that kind of like that hit a wall. She got sick, and then we ended up breaking up. And then I just closed up shop in New York and drove to San Francisco in 3 days and stayed there for a couple years, and then went back to New York, dude. Back to New York for another decade.
That's what I meant to say when I said the cities that started you. But I know you had Brill on, but is there a reason he didn't like try to put you in a bunch of movies? Like I
I
can't
couldn't
remember.
stand him. We couldn't stand each other. We were always at each other's throats. And he wasn't really, he put me in the Mighty Ducks too, but he cut me out.
Just so funny to hear you say that phrase.
Oh, it was great footage. That's a great story.
No, I remember you did tell that story when he was on the show.
Yeah. You're scaring the ducks. But I have that footage I have the footage on some sort of videotape. We really didn't get along for years. I mean, he gave me but when I got to LA, he was one of those guys that really had a plan and understood how LA worked and was networking and was hanging out with a crew of guys who were comers. I never understood how show business worked or how life worked or how anything fucking worked. I just wanted to be a comic. I was like feral, and emotionally I was like out of my mind and needy and crazy, and he couldn't hack it. So we really, I got to LA, we wrote a screenplay together, and we almost killed each other, and he wanted to get an agent, and I'm like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. So that's when I moved up to the Comedy Store. And after that our relationship became very strained, and then he became like Sandler's guy. And I mocked Sandler on Conan O'Brien once. Sandler got in my face about it, and then Steve got in my face about it. And he was in the Sandler camp. He was a Sandler stooge, and and for years it was just no way.
What had you said about him on Conan?
It was just part of a bit.
Just like
You
hacky
know,
movies or whatever?
it was just like it was a characterization. It was like I did a character in a bit of a guy on a skateboard playing like Flight of the Valkyries on his phone. It was a long bit, with his baseball cap turned backwards, on his way to a Sandler movie. So it was really mocking a Sandler fan. But like Sandler came up to me after at some point at the Improv and said, "I hear you talking about me." And I'm like, "Yeah, I did it on TV." He's like, "Well, you got to do that." He was mad about it. And I guess I get it. But after a certain point, I know we're all in the same business, but if you're a cultural icon, you are not, you're fair game. And I wasn't just attacking him. It was very subtle in a way. But I don't like, I think we're over that. That was many years ago.
So, I mean, and once upon a time, that's what people put you in their movie for, right? Was just to be sort of whatever angry guy, right? Like you were like
I'm not sure that's not still happening to some degree. I wasn't in that many movies.
no, but
Really,
like
what movies was I in? I was in, yeah, I did that one bit in Almost Famous.
right, but that's sort of like the thing, right? Here's this crazy little dude, right?
Yeah, but there was only it was only that one time, and then for decades, nothing. I mean, I did Mitch Hedberg's movie Los Enchiladas, but I wasn't really angry in that. I was the bitter menu writer, which
Right.
is kind of cool.
Well, this leads me to talking about, more the stuff you do now because you're, dare I say, actually an actor, right? Not
Yeah,
just a guy. Let's bring Mark in to say lock the gates because we like who he is as a person and we think there's a vibe there that we dig.
right.
But so I watched Sort of Truth. Is it Sort of Truth?
Trust,
Sort of Trust. Stacy and I watched it. Stacy wanted me to tell you she really liked it. Stacy's as critical as I am about things. We have very like low threshold, low patience. And, you know, when someone tells you to watch something they're in, there's always that thing of like, dear God, I hope it's not horrible, right? And
Yeah.
even for you, dude, even as established as you
But I
are,
know that. I
okay,
mean, I know that.
right,
And I would have told you.
right. So I sit down.
I did. I told you not to watch the Spencer movie. That not that you wouldn't like it. It's a action-packed comedy thing. I only have a little bit in it, and the
Right,
same with the Joker. I have a little bit in it,
right.
and the movie's fine, and I'm good. But I thought Sort of Trust, like there's a groove to it that's engaging.
Well, here's what's really good. Here's what's really good about it. Um, and there's things obviously that you have nothing to do with, right? Like, a writer or director setting sort of a tone that works. But I would say for you, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, I know you well enough to know, like, your best moments are when it really is something that's close to you, right?
Sure.
Which isn't,
Yeah, that certainly in that movie. Yeah.
it's not an exaggerated version of you, like kind of like the Maron show, right?
Right.
It really is how you talk about something or how you think about something. I started, you told me to check out the Easy episodes. I only got 10 minutes into that one, but even, you're doing that interview with that woman in the radio, and it's pretty clear you're losing yourself into the thing, little subtleties like laughing about stuff, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's Mark being Mark, but it's great. And I've heard you say that only recently you've learned by interviewing all these actors, like, oh, I'm just supposed to get to being me and forget about that I'm acting.
Right. There's that. But both of those projects, the weird thing about those, like Easy and Sort of Trust, is they were both totally improvised.
100%?
Yes.
Well, I knew Sort of Trust had some improv. I was going to ask you about that, but I'm saying they just gave you a rough idea and then just go?
Yeah.
Well, no wonder you knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, that Lynn. Well, it's not really easy to do that. I mean, not everyone can do that.
No, of course not.
But she had a story, and there were scene breakdowns, but there was no script. So like she knew what needed to happen for the story. So we were given that information. And then you just get there.
But those other characters aren't necessarily like themselves, but you seem to be able to fall into whatever you is pretty good.
Right. Well, right. That's true. Yeah, I had a problem with that early on in the movie too. I'm like, if these guys don't reel it in a little bit and if they keep getting bigger and broader, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna be a straight man to a bunch of clowns.
Right.
And she took that note and everyone kind of reeled it in. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. I shouldn't say that. I don't know how to commit to that broad a character. Like I can tell you that the way I see or understand acting and improvising is different, but that is a different it's a different skill set. Because I think the guy in Easy is actually more self-centered than I am. The Easy character
is that possible?
Yeah, for sure. Because he might be a manifestation of me when I was younger, but he's definitely kind of has a blind side and the self-importance thing. But that's the way that guy is. But he's different than me in that. But I'm not saying that's not within me, but I'm through that. And the guy in um, like um, like Sam Sylvia in Glow, again, like this is something that's afforded other actors by not having a podcast all the time, where people go like, "That's just you being you," but it's really not, because Sam Sylvia is not neurotic at all.
Right.
And so I had to shut that shit off. He has no self-awareness around that shit, and that's a scripted show. So the way I dealt with that character is like I can relate to him, but I'm not him because he doesn't give a fuck. I give a fuck. So
but I think
I had
there's
to
a
make
massive distinction between the guy that owns the pawn shop and Sam Sylvia. I think there's massive difference.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
And I think I enjoy you in both, but I certainly recognize essentially my friend Mark.
But if you think about the Sort of Trust guy, the thing that makes him different than me is that he lives in heartbreak. Like, I've experienced heartbreak, but I don't live in it. So like, that whole guy is that, because of the way his life has gone, that, maybe if I'd gone another path where he's a beaten guy, he's
Right.
had to surrender to the life he's in, and he knows exactly why. And he lives in that. that sort of sadness with, very thin shield against, just falling into a pit altogether. And that shield is anger.
So, uh, you checking your notifications?
Something just happened.
Did the world shut down? Did they close down the city?
No. Oh, good. Okay. Okay. Doing thing.
Stay with me, buddy.
I'm with you. It was just Lynn. She's in the house. Go ahead.
Okay. So with sort of trust, is it you guys sit down for a couple of days and kind of talk about, here's the tone, here's where this thing is going, and now like no rehearsal, let's just shoot, let's just block it and just go?
Well, Lynn is very good at that. There's only a few directors that can do that, and I happen to work with two of the best. Joe Swanberg, who did Easy, is great at it. I'm making a movie with improvising, because all of Easy is improvised. And Lynn's very good at it too. She's made quite a few movies with that. But there's not a lot of people that can do it well. So how it works is, we're dating, her and I, in real life now. And we've known each other a long time. And she knows me. She understands me. She's a huge fan of mine. And she likes what I do, and she's acutely sensitive to it, what she can get out of me. So I trust her as a director. She directed both of my last two specials as well, and a couple episodes of Maron and a couple episodes of Glow, but whatever. So what she wrote that story with Michael O'Brien. He's the guy who created AP Bio, and he used to be an SNL writer. So they got together. She wanted me to be in a movie. We were writing a movie. We still are, but it wasn't happening quick enough for her. So she had me in mind. So Michael O'Brien knows me as well. So she somehow had this inspiration that I should own a pawn shop. And that's where it started for her.
In Alabama?
No, it was originally going to be somewhere else. Like, I think it was going to be in Kentucky. But yeah, the South. Alabama, it just was cheaper to shoot there for whatever reason. So that was the story. So they wrote this whole crazy story, and it was all down on paper. Then she hand chose the cast, picking people that could do what we did there. Great improvisers. Toby Huss, Michaela, John Bass, and why do I always do this with her? It's so stupid.
It's okay. People can look up
No,
the cast.
it's not okay. It's really not okay, because I do it all the fucking time, and it's just like a brain fart.
I know.
And it bothers me. Jillian Bell. I didn't look it up. I almost did. Jillian Bell. They're all great at that, and then Dan Baxtel, great. And so we had dinner together, I think, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But no, you just sort of get into it, and she, the pawn shop was a real pawn shop. It was massive. Like that pawn shop is just one part of a larger pawn shop. The guy who owns that place, Gene, was able to give us that chunk and have us close it off and still run his business out of the other chunk of it. It's like the size of a fucking warehouse. So they had to put up a fake wall and create, but that counter was already there. There's a whole second counter. It's like a separate.
Right. And so this character, it's like, again, those that you, like, from New Mexico, but clearly, an East Coast
we added
Jew.
all that part in, but I think that we added in from my life. Why not have it from my life? It grounds the character better. Someone needed to be grounded in that thing in a real way.
So you're saying
I'm the anchor of that fucking crew there.
No, well, clearly. So, but you're saying that their desire to go to, let's just call it the ridiculous, which isn't
right.
It's not a cut down. It's just kind of where it goes, right? It's just really delicate. I mean, I think.
No, totally. And
like humor is so, like, if it's done wrong, it's just bad. It's just cheesy.
We had to figure it out.
So you're saying they were getting bigger and bigger, and you were like, "Hey guys, like let's bring it back."
Well, it was right at the beginning, and I think it's like, improvisers like to, show off.
Right.
You know, Toby's an actor.
Which one's Toby?
The guy who played Hogjaws. He's great.
He's
I
great.
mean,
Yeah. He's been
if
in
you look up
everything.
Toby Huss, he's been
Yeah.
in everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's not like a Second City guy. And Michaela too. They're all actors, but like improvising, like Toby really got lost in that guy. And that guy almost looks over the top. But all the fucking crew from Alabama was like, no, we know that guy.
Right.
That guy's a real guy.
Right.
Right. And Michaela is funny, but like there is this thing where I started to get intimidated because I'm insecure about my abilities to specifically improvise in broad characters, because they had they really kind of went into these things. And I'm like, I don't have that. I don't do that. So I was intimidated by it.
Right.
But there was an element of like, if they're going to keep trying to out improvise each other, and I told them, I said, these have got to somehow become real people, or we're going to be in trouble. The
Right.
movie's going to be in trouble.
Right.
And there was a note about that, early on, and they all eventually grounded themselves, and I think became as believable as they could. And the story's ridiculous because, Lynn wanted to do a comedy caper, and it
Right.
is a little over the top,
Right.
but it's sort of relevant because the subject matter is of the now,
Yeah, and I think people definitely go watch it. I will tell you, you do have to pay for it, which nowadays I know is sacrilege. That's how much I love you, Mark. I paid $13.99 on Amazon.
Things a lot.
It was and maybe eventually it'll be on Netflix, but for now it's iTunes or Amazon for $14.
To rent it for 14?
Yes.
No shit. I just rented Betty Gilpin's new movie, The Hunt.
Or maybe I own it. Maybe I own it now forever. But either way, there's usually like a $3.99 option. It wasn't there. That's all I'm saying. Maybe I own it now
we
forever.
got to make some money. It's an independent film. God forbid.
Well, but just telling people, be prepared if you want to see it, and it's definitely worth it. I really enjoyed it. But let's talk about.
You know what's interesting though, real quick, Matt, is that the thing about that movie, and look, I know when I'm in shit, and I know, like, when I tell people to watch my special, even friends, I know what it's like because I don't watch a lot of specials, but I'm like, it's good, dude. I'm like, I'm not telling you because I'm looking for you to blow smoke up my ass. It's like that's like a lifetime's worth of work in that thing. But the thing I knew about sort of Trust is that because of the improvising, it's very engaging, because you really don't know where it's going to go. And it's got a very strange human rhythm to it because it's all happening in the immediate, and it feels different. And it's very engaging, and you don't really realize it until it's like, oh my God, you've been watching it for a while.
And I would say, try not to spoil things for people. I have to sometimes, by the way, not listen to episodes of yours for that reason, because you'll have the guest and you'll get right to the current movie, and it's like I'm going to watch that movie first. So I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say that I was happy with the ending. I was very happy, and I thought if it went the other way, talk about the very ending, and if it went another way, I would have been like, I don't think that's real. I think that's what that guy would have done. You know what I'm saying?
Because like I was sort of like when she told me, when I went over the story, when Lynn told me the story of it, I was like, no, at the end, I said to her, if we can get some money, the earth should open and he should go back down and live in the earth, in the hollow earth. He's like, no.
What else? Oh, but then I remember thinking on a couple of times in the music, I remember thinking like that might be Mark. And then it turns out you did all of the music.
Right.
Let's talk about that.
It was easier than you would assume. Like I'm out here in my studio now, like I have my guitars around and stuff. And if you listen to my podcast, at the very end, if you hang in there, I'll sit and noodle on a guitar.
But aren't the interstitials you too when you introduce the guest?
Because that's from doing it at the end, and then Brendan banks them, and then he's used them. So I have like hundreds of those, just like 2 or 3 minute bits of me playing different guitars with some different effects. So we were, Lynn thought it would fit the tone of the movie. So I said, if I did the music, I said, well, you're in luck. There's hundreds of those. So I had Brendan, my producer, just send her 100, just a bunch of those. And she was able to fold those in, and some of them timed out perfectly. But they're all pieces outside of the last piece.
The last piece has drums and everything, right?
But that's the end. The last piece was a real song that I wrote, and it's registered with ASCAP and everything with Tal Wilkenfeld, the genius bass player, the prodigy bass player. What's up?
Somebody's singing.
Oh, Tal Wilkenfeld, the bass genius, and I wrote that based on sort of a blues riff. And she brought in a whole crew of top-notch musicians. We spent the day in the studio. So that last bit under the credits, "New Boots" is the name of the composition. That's real shit, man. But that's me playing guitar still.
But I'm saying I think that's pretty right.
It's cool. It's cool.
One thing I also have you seen, or was the discussion of American Buffalo come up at all?
During no, but I afterwards I kind of sensed that. Yeah. It's like the setting is similar. Yeah.
Right.
I could probably play Teach. Yeah.
No, but seriously, it's like, I don't know if it was inspired by it or like just one of those things. It's like you said with comedy, sometimes it's just in there. Is that it's not just the setting. It's a sort of a tone and this.
I guess that's true because the junkie kid in American Buffalo kind of hung around like John did.
Right.
No, I don't know. Lynn never mentioned that. She literally had the inspiration driving down Santa Monica Boulevard. She saw a pawn shop and she's like, "That's where Mark needs to be." Right. So not in her mind. I have not heard the American Buffalo thing, but I after the fact I kind of realized it.
It's certainly a much lighter version.
Yeah. Someone I know is doing American Buffalo. Probably not now, but someone, I think it was Andre Royo. But yeah, no, I think it would be a good series really if we could figure out how to string it along. That the setting of that, yeah, maybe. But I don't know. You'd have to figure out a different sort of adventure for every episode.
Right. But I think it's like, especially now, maybe who knows, especially whenever, it does seem like people try to do that a lot, right? Like, let's get these people together and let's do a wacky, somewhat like, is it somewhere between real and ridiculous? And again, when it's done poorly, I'm turned off in about 5 seconds. Like, they're trying too hard. They're trying too hard. And that's, I think, the biggest crime of a comedy. Don't you think?
Sure. Well, I think that what makes sort of Trust different is that, well, the biggest crime of a comedy really is when they're scripted and you know that the flat joke you just watched had to go through hundreds of takes maybe, and was kind of approved by committee. And you're like, how many people were involved in that terrible joke falling flat in this movie? But I think the great thing about Sword was that everybody found an emotional place to come from that was genuine, and it makes a big difference. I think a lot of like wacky comedies is that the characters are shallow, and they're just written a certain way and they're performed in an over the top way, and there's no humanity to them. But I think one of the reasons why Sort of Trust works is that all these people are innately, they're actors, and they all found, I think, a very genuine emotional place to come from, and you can feel that.
Can we talk about what's going on now?
Yeah.
In terms of the world?
Sure.
You guys are a little ahead of us, right? Because we're Atlanta, so we're not the first to act, right?
I don't even know why I'm wearing these headphones. I'm not even using them. Yeah. Sitting here, there's nothing coming through them, and I'm not using the mic. So, all right, go ahead. Yeah, we're ahead of you.
So they haven't done the state mandated everybody has to stay home thing, right? They're going to, because everybody's doing it. They closed the restaurants a day after you guys did, or 2 days after you guys did. I'm trying to think what else there was. But I'm at this co-working space that usually has a lot of people in it, and it's empty. And I'm feeling very fortunate because there's 5 people in my house, including me. I can't get anything done, right?
Yeah, right.
And if they put this building on lockdown, which they might, I'm going to be in trouble.
No, you won't. You'll figure out how to do it.
I mean, without going insane.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true. but like you said, well, that's just because you have a family and you're going to have to, take walks and shit. Like I don't know that struggle. I mean, I'm just, Lynn and I, this is certainly a test of our relationship because she, they canceled her thing that she was shooting in Boston and she's got a place of her own, but like, why not be together? I mean, it's not, you know what I mean? There's nothing to do. But yeah, I don't know how families are faring because, did they shut down the schools there?
Oh, well, that's the whole thing. That was the first to go. So we're in the start of the second week of no school, but it
Of
feels,
homeschooling and
but
shit?
it right. And that's another, the homeschooling
Yeah,
is another piece of it that we have to get into. Like, guess
crazy.
what? Guess what? We're not trained to do that.
Yeah,
Part two, guess what? Our kids don't listen to us. They listen to their teachers because the teachers aren't us.
right. So
So
you don't have appropriate disciplinary rules in place and no boundaries, and it's problematic because your kids are monsters.
yes,
Right?
yes.
Yeah, good.
Um, so for those without kids, you're still. Let me ask you this. I messaged you. I feel bad for anybody who's starting out now. Like if you had not even paid gigs lined up, but just basic gigs lined up, and you can't do that thing, right? Just
Yeah.
performing open mics, even you can't
Well,
do.
I mean, I think what's worse is people that are living hand to mouth with regular jobs
Well, that's
in the
everybody.
service industry. Yeah,
Well, listen, that's everybody. But
everybody.
I'm saying I thought specifically about people in the stand-up world because that's your world and it was my world and I always feel semi connected to it. Did your tour was over, right? So that you didn't have any issues
Yeah, I was
there.
ready. I was ready for downtime, and I wouldn't have taken it because I was already back in the clubs doing new shit.
Really retired 100% that bit and on to the new.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah. Because like I was working out hour 45. That thing's only 72. So there was another, you know, 30 minutes there that didn't make the special and a few bits that I was working on anyway. So I'm already into like a new 40, that
That's
wasn't
dude.
in.
That's awesome. You've
Yeah.
I feel like you've gotten what's the word? Uh ec- incrementally, what's the word? Exponentially more prolific in the last 10 years.
I guess I always seem to turn out a new hour or hour and a half every year and a half to 2 years.
But remember, we were always so impressed that Louis did it every year.
Not
We
me. I was doing that. I mean,
okay,
I mean, maybe people who weren't working that way. I always worked that way. I mean, if you look at, I've got 5 CDs and now 4 or 5 specials. I've always generated at least an hour or an hour and a half every year to year and a half. So, like, I think it's just a matter of like that was something that became this thing in comedy because Carlin laid it down and then Rock took it up and then it became this sort of like the idea that it was primarily to generate specials that you got to do a new hour but also just to keep your audience interested. I always did that. Anyone who thought that was impressive was somebody who wasn't doing their job.
well, okay then. But also, it wasn't. I mean, also, Carlin and Rock were doing it really well. It's not just like, oh, they put out a special, right?
I don't know. Like I don't. That's probably arguable. Like there have been comics that have been afforded opportunities to do, an hour special every year of their careers. Was every George Carlin special great? I don't know. I would argue no.
I mean, if I went back, probably some of them don't age as well. But certainly, as an impressionable teen in early 20s, I thought everything he did was,
I don't know. Like I think Chris Rock put it best. He said like a lot of the later Carlin is like you're going to wade through a lot of stuff that's okay, but there's always going to be one great bit.
right, right, because he just kind of became this crankier old dude.
I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. When the pressure is on, when your business is about, holding the mantle, which those guys do, um, you have to keep generating to hold the mantle. So I don't know that all that work is always as good as the last one necessarily. I know that the one I just did is really 2 years in the making, and I can feel it and see it. And the last 3 I've done, I've been very sort of diligent to make them seem like one piece through callbacks and themes. Like, you know, I know that, I don't know if I become more prolific, but I become more disciplined. I've always been pretty prolific. But like the difference between this one and the one I did for Netflix years ago, so this is my third one on Netflix. Thinky Pain was completely sort of half improvisational, half it's like 90 minutes. I've got my notebooks up there. But then like I got this thing in hair up my ass where I'm like, you know, like, what am I doing? I mean, the whole nature of that show, it opened with a joke about being prepared versus not being prepared. You know, like if you're not prepared and it works out, you know, you can always say like, you know, what was the joke? There's something along the lines of being prepared is overrated because if you're not prepared and it doesn't work, you can just be like, I wasn't prepared. But if it does work out, you're like, no, I'm fucking genius, you know? So there's two sides to it.
I think I live
Like,
my life that way. Wait a minute. I think that's what
right,
I did for the last 15
right,
years.
right. You protect yourself by being sloppy. But I had a personal beef in my head where I'm watching these other comics because I like flying by the seat of my pants. I like improvising on the stand-up stage. That's how I generate material. But I would watch these guys who were meticulously sort of like organized, you know, when they do a special. I've done specials that I didn't like. If you look at my 1995 Fillmore West, Fillmore East is long gone, but my Fillmore special, it was a HBO half hour from 95. And I was so deep in the mindset of improvising, like doing like Luna Lounge and alternative comedy, that I entered that half hour special kind of like, I kind of got an idea. And there's a bit in the middle of that special that I had no idea I was going to do a story. And it's one of the best things I've ever done. But I didn't know I was going to do it. It's not a great way to work. It's very taxing and it's a high risk. But over the last three specials, I'm like, well, I'm a professional. I'm as professional as any of these other motherfuckers, you know, even if I don't get, you know, the attention or, I deserve, or the following I deserve. I usually get the respect I deserve, but I'm like, I can fucking do it. I can organize it and still leave room for myself to be spur of the moment if I want. So the last three specials have been tight as fuck. Tight as fuck. I'm not saying I'm not, still putting them together by the night of. Like the last special, more later, I was still running an hour and a half heading into the special. The last week, I had not trimmed it down to 73 minutes. And as a testament to my professionalism or my skill set, the last show I did before I had to tape, I sat down, I looked at the set, I took out everything that didn't sort of connect to the other bits in the set, pulled them all out, committed the fucking list to memory, and went up and did 74 minutes.
That's great.
It's crazy. I had no idea I could do that. And then the day of the shooting of the last one, Too Real, I realized like the closer was a bit dark. So I had to create another bit to put at the end, or take a bit because I wanted to have a callback. So I did the cap bit at the end of Too Real. I actually put in place basically the day of special with the callback. And in the new special, there's a couple of moments that are totally improvised that only happened that night.
Well, I guess I should watch it then, because I just saw you here and you said, watch the new special. I was like, I just saw it. And you're like, well, you should watch it. So now I will, now that you said there's new things.
Well, I mean, it's all there that you saw, but you probably saw an hour and a half version.
Right.
This is like 70 minutes and it's pretty tight and everything sort of ties together pretty well. But there's a beat in that joke, the joke about, it's the one that everyone's all excited about or horrified that I seem to have prophesized something that what's it going to take to bring everybody together? It's going to be something awful. And
right.
in the special, it's like the sky's on fire thing.
Right.
But now that was done in October. And now because of the virus, people are like, dude, you called it. And I'm like, yeah,
well, the famous thing about Carlin's special, remember? You'll remember when I tell you, before 9/11, it was going to be called I Kind of Like It When a Lot of People Die.
Yeah.
That was going to be the name of the special.
Yeah.
And then 9/11 happened and he changed it to You could Google it, whatever that one was.
Right.
So yours is called End Times Fun.
Yeah, but that was after, like, I wanted to call it Jeremiad, and they wouldn't let me.
You wanted to call it what?
Jeremiad.
Jeremiad? Is that a
Yeah,
combination of two words?
no, this is the reason why they wouldn't let me do it. A Jeremiad from the book of Jeremiah in the Bible is I'll read you the definition, a long, mournful complaint or lamentation, a list of woes. And I thought, that's it, man. It's a comedic Jeremiah.
Right.
And Robbie over at Netflix is like, we can't call it that. I'm like, why not? I'm pushing back. He's like, no one's going to know what the fuck that is. And when it comes up on the menu, they're not going to know what that is. They need to know it's a comedy special. And I'm like, I push back a little bit, and I'm like, fuck it. Well, let's just call it End Times Fun.
Right.
Because that's what it is. That's what it's about. And that was the meaning.
All right. I'm going to ask you perhaps a silly question.
Oh, wait. I was going to tell you, though, there's a beat in that joke that just happened that night. And I'm so happy about it. Like, it was the thing about, like, you know, usually it takes something horrible to bring everyone together. And then that night I threw in, like, or maybe an outdoor music festival, but that never goes anywhere. And it's my favorite moment because, like, I found the moment to riff in that bit that had been, pretty locked in.
Right.
But to me, it's like, I think it's hilarious.
I'm glad you like it. That's good.
But it's nice to find a moment when you're under that kind of pressure to riff a little bit, even knowing that you can cut in those situations. I generally try to, not make it too sloppy.
So, technical question for you. Do you have any say on Netflix is feeding me content? They're feeding me you now, right? And if I don't click away fast enough, I'm going to get a good minute of Mark, right? I'm going to get a good 30 seconds, my little preview. Who gets to make that call?
I didn't. I mean, I
do you care?
I could have had some say. I'm not sure they used the best thing. But like, I always feel that with pictures or anything else.
It's like a headshot. You're just like, none of them's perfect. Let's just pick one.
Well, now, because there's so much of any of us out there, pictures that have been taken, clips here and there. A lot of people will use pictures that are like old. Like for my last tour, I just had a placeholder picture, but it's got to be 5 years old, and it became the tour picture. And I was
But I'm saying, do they run that by you? Do you want them to?
Yeah, they run by the possibilities. You will get, choices of, like, all the banner art, all the artwork, I had a part of, like,
right.
Getting the lettering right. Like, I like the ideas. We shelved a lot of ideas I thought were terrible, but
right.
They usually they'll give you, like, a bunch of clips that they're going to use promotionally that they want to use, and you okay them. So I'm sure I okayed it. I didn't know it would be the trailer.
All right. I just typed in End Times Fun, and it says NPR 2 hours ago. So that thing you recorded before we got on the phone is already on NPR?
No, that's Fresh Air. Terry Gross interviewed me last week.
Okay.
The thing I did today was the frame. I don't know when he's going to run it.
Your old buddy, Terry Gross.
Love her.
Did I tell you how much I appreciated? I think she was on it. That thing that Jesse did, the turnaround.
Jesse. Oh, yeah.
Did you listen to the ones that weren't you?
I don't listen to anything.
So this is what
I listen to music.
All right. Well, I've brought this up before to people. I'll say it to you now. So what Jesse Thorne did was he interviewed famous interviewers. So you're on it. Terry Gross is on it.
Yeah.
Larry King is on it.
Ira?
What's that?
Ira Glass? No?
Ira Glass, Katie Couric. And he talks to people about their approach. And someone like Terry Gross has not only all of her questions in advance, but like an A, B, and C path, depending how it goes, right? And then there's someone like you that kind of goes, let's just talk and see how this goes. And Larry King is also that way. Larry said, I know he's a kind of a joke of himself at this point of his age, but he said, I want to learn as the audience learns. Why do I want to read all this stuff in advance? And because that's the way I like it too, by the way. But what I got from that was there is no right way, right? Katie Couric, also unbelievably prepared. Ira Glass, says he might spend a week in a town and use one soundbite, right? Whereas I'd use like the whole town, right? And there's no right way. Like there's a craft to it.
Depends what you're trying to do. I think there is a right way to, if what you're doing is specifically journalistic. Like if you need to get a who, what, when, where, why trip, you better know what you're gunning for.
Right.
You got to know what you're looking for. For me, because it's just like I'm looking for connection, and I'm looking for an engaged story, that's moving or whatever. So that's different. That's a conversational element. But I think that a lot of times a journalist who's interviewing is looking for certain information. And I think in order to get certain information, you should know how you're going to try, But no, there's no set way to do it.
No, I think I do it basically like you do. Like I'll do a quick, I mean, not with you, obviously, but anybody I don't know that well, I'll do a quick Wikipedia thing, grab some, like, okay, I probably want to bring, once upon a time, I actually did try to actually write like 3 notes down but then I never even looked at it because it went where it went. And sure enough, once in a while, I'll get off thinking, damn it, I forgot to say that one thing. But most of the time, it just goes how it's supposed to go.
I usually frame it in my mind like, where does this person live in that body, right? So, and I try to figure out how to get there, because all these people, public people, have a thing they do publicly. They have, a lot of them know how to handle themselves in these situations. So how do you get around that? Like where does the person that this person is, where do they live? Where does that come from? And I try to sort of get a feeling for that when I'm looking at the materials that I look at, or I try to get a feeling for what my own curiosity is around getting to that place with that person, because a lot of people spin bullshit that they've spun before all day long. And I do it too. I mean, it's just, it's something, if people ask you the questions that are answered by the stuff you have prepared, why not use that? That's the story, and I get asked certain things all the time. And I'll give you the story. But a lot of times, like I know what moments in this that, like I know when I'm telling something new, or doing something different. So how do I get them in that place, And usually it's just a meditation that I do on the materials and be like, feels like that, that place where they got that horse or whatever the fuck it is,
Right.
like.
Well, I'm sure I've asked you this before, about getting enamored with folks, right? And even someone you've never said you were the biggest like Bruce guy in the world, but the weight of that guy and I thought you pulled some really great shit out of that guy, right? So you just read his book and thought, this guy's got some dad stuff going on I can probably get to.
Well, he's pretty, I mean, if you read the book, I mean, it's pretty thorough. I mean, like I got something out of him only because, he's one of these guys that, his public persona seems very authentic. Like that's his whole trip. Yeah, man, just me and the fellas, so. But
sorry.
What?
It's just almost a Bruce impression. I know that's not what you do, so it was pretty funny.
It was pretty close, right?
Right.
But so that's him. We're just playing the music and yeah. So
when the cops busted up Madame Marie.
Yeah. Exactly.
For telling fortunes better than they do. Sorry.
Right. Those stories he tells during live shows are stories that he'll go to when you interview him.
Right.
He'll do it. And he did it. That's what he did. Like, I don't know if I helped in inspiring him to do that Broadway show, but like, but the thing I knew about reading the amount of the book that I read was that, and I have regrets coming out of that, but I think the stuff I would have asked him directly was already in there, is that the dad stuff is clear. his dad was a fucking drunk, who he, had a hard time with. And his upbringing was brutal. He was a poor white kid living in garbage. His dad was a drunk. His sister's wife got away from her. Like, it's rough stuff. His mother, like, it's all very rough stuff. Like, he's the real deal, whatever the fuck that is. So I knew that he'd struggled with this darkness and with this depression. And my belief was that he had to be furious under there somewhere. So how was I going to get there? And the only way I could do it was to, and I don't do this as much as I used to, but I will do it, was to go ahead and place myself in this conversation. Like, you and I are going to talk about the problems that we have in common. I'm going to make you do that. And, that's a rough thing to pull off, when you're at his house waiting for him. But I knew, like, right when he came down, like, the best moment for me in that whole fucking interview was when he came down from his house. And this was over Christmas break, dude. And he sits in that chair and he's got his book. He didn't know what he was getting into. These most of the people, that some of them don't know what my show is. So he thought he was just going to do another book thing and maybe read a little bit out of it if he was asked. But he sits there, and I told him I didn't touch any of the equipment. He says, he could have touched it, and I'm like, but then I go, so what is it, crazy up at the house? Like Christmas shit, people cooking? He's like, correct. Like, all right. And I'm like, that's the guy I want to talk to.
Exactly.
How do I keep that guy talking?
Exactly.
Correct. And, and I didn't know if I was going to pull it off, but I did. Because there was a point where I'm comparing notes with him. Like, the only place I feel good is on stage, because like I don't trust people in intimate situations. He's like, of course you don't. And I'm like, great, But he talked to Tal, that bass player I talked to you about. Like, because Tal was about to start a press tour, and she had met with Bruce, because she's like a very respected musician, and she was asking him advice, about how to handle interviews and stuff. And Bruce said, well, you decide what you're going to say, and no matter what they ask, you say what you've decided you're going to say. And then she goes, well, I listened to your interview with my friend Marc Maron, and he goes,
oh, dude, you just broke up. What'd you say?
She said, I listened to that interview you did with my friend Marc Maron, and he looked at her and goes, he pushed.
That's great.
Well, yeah.
That's a compliment.
Yeah, Neil Young had the same experience. Neil Young left my house, and that was a difficult interview, but it was good because I got him loose, and that's all I wanted. With those kind of guys, like all the fucking Bruce heads, all the Neil heads, they know everything already. They know everything.
Right.
They might not know that morning, which is good, but they know all the shit.
Right. It's better that you don't. Right. It's better that you don't. It's better that you don't.
It's better that I don't, but also, what do you want that interview for?
Right.
I can't think about pleasing the Bruce guys with information about Bruce. There's no way I'm going to get at it.
Right.
All I could do is like hope that they liked the conversation I had, and they all loved it. They were like, holy shit, no one's ever done that.
Of course. Of course.
Made him a person. So,
but you know what line stuck with me?
Neil, what?
Go ahead. No, well, let me just finish that. You can talk about Neil. Number one, I remember that moment too, because it was so real. It's in the show, right?
What, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But it's like, yeah, I just came from a fucking crazy fucking house, right? And I'm a dad with a bunch of kids, so I get it. But he talked about, when he's talking about anxiety or depression or whatever, and the show must go on, and I forget exactly how he said it. He's like, but you are going out there, man. No matter what, you are going out. And I was like, I mean, wasn't that fucking amazing?
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I neglected to talk to him about, which I think is a real key to him, is that, he's clearly a control freak. And it's because he has, if you have an alcoholic parent or parents, you're going to go one of two ways. Either you're going to be a control freak or you're going to be a drunk. And he's a control freak, classic ACOA, adult child alcoholic shit. But the thing I would have liked to hear him speak to is like, he's painfully hard on himself. I mean, just compulsively hard on himself. When you hear about, him, recording, going over the mastering Born to Run, just the hours and weeks on one song, like he just the perfectionism thing.
Right.
And I didn't talk to him about it, but he's got it in spades, and that's a rough one. To never be good enough to yourself, rough.
Well, especially when the world is telling you the opposite.
I think people feel it. I think they feel his struggle. His struggle is real, man. And like that whole period where he didn't know who he was, where he got married that first time, and he's out here in Hollywood, and Jacob Dylan threw him a bone. Like, he went through it. But Neil, so Neil like is rough, and I didn't know he didn't like to be interviewed, and he was trying to sell this ridiculous Pomo thing, this iPod alternative.
I don't think I listened to this one.
Oh, you gotta listen to it. Because like I'm just like, I don't like, I'm a Neil guy, but like I know some of his records. I like Neil. I'm intimidated by him. He's intense and weird. But like we have the same amp, And I didn't know going in that he hates interviewers, doesn't like to be interviewed. I'm like, but somehow or another I lucked out. He came over to my house with his like 70-something-year-old posse, a couple other white-haired dudes, his manager and another guy. And they'd given me the Pomo player, and they'd lent me this set of high-end earphones, that I was supposed to return. But somehow or another, he walked into my old house and he saw it. And he saw my records. He saw my guitar, and he's like, "Oh, like he dug it. Like I could see he dug it. Like I got one of those guitars. Like I don't think he went and played. He might have played it. I know James Taylor went over and played it. I don't think Neil did. But like he was kind of liking the vibe." And I told him, like, here's the stuff you can take back. He's like, no, I like this guy. Let him keep it. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. And then we go out into the garage, and I had this big plan. Like, I had this old 53 amp, the old amp that I know he plays a similar one. And I'm like, we'll start there. It'll be good. So he sits down in the old garage. I'm like, yeah, man. So probably recognize that amp, right? And he's like, no, not really. What is that? And I'm like, that's the Fender Deluxe. Don't you play? Yeah, I guess I do. And I'm like, oh, you motherfucker. Like, he wasn't going to give it to me, man.
Right.
Like it was going to be a fucking slog.
Right.
And I know this from doing this now, a long time. And I'm like, all right, so plan B. So we're just going at it. And like, I don't know how I got him loosened up and laughing, but it was the nicotine lozenges. He started like counting, like looked at the nicotine lozenges. I told him what they were. And he's like, how many are you doing? And then he got off on trying to figure out how many I did. And then I got him laughing. And then, okay, now we're rolling. All right.
Right.
And out of that interview, he talked about his son who has disabilities, a CP, and another son with other problems. I think he's a little spectrum himself. And we talked about, losing friends to drugs. Like we really got in it, and it turned out to be great. And then he got back to the amp and the equipment he uses. But apparently he left here and went back to his house. He copped to going to Pilates with what's her name? Who's he? Daryl Hannah, who's he's married to now. So like Neil goes to Pilates. That was big information for the Neil heads,
Right.
But apparently he goes back to his house where Dan Rather is waiting to shoot an episode of his show, whatever the fuck that is. Dan Rather. Fucking Dan Rather. And my producer, Brendan's got a buddy who works for Rather. And Neil walks in from driving from my house and says, I just had a really, really great interview with a guy. And Dan Rather goes, what made it great? This wasn't on camera. This was like he just walks in.
Right.
And Neil goes, well, because he was fearless and he wasn't afraid to fail.
Wow. That's like, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's like a highlight of, you know what I mean?
But I think that's a stand-up thing too, I think that is, like you get a certain kind of like, what's the worst that can happen here? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to offend anybody necessarily. Well, that's not true. In an interview situation, if someone's not comfortable, I'm not going to keep hitting that button. But, to step out on the fucking ice, what do you got to lose? What's the worst that could happen? Like, they're not going to go there. And And I can read that usually, or someone will go like, I'm not going to talk about that, or they'll switch the subject. I know all the tricks by now.
Right. Well, you've told me certain things that I won't necessarily mention, but like ones that didn't sound that you told me weren't that great, and I was like, I love that episode. You're like, Brendan's a magician, and I think he doesn't get enough credit. I think anybody who hasn't listened, go back and listen to, is it episode 1000 that you do together?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
And
think so. Yeah,
and
yeah.
you'll learn, first of all, surprise to me, that like these are heavily edited shows. They're not just Mark riffing for an hour.
Shaped,
They're
shaped.
they're shaped. I mean, obviously, Mark is great at what he does, and it's a true partnership. You and this guy have made some, this great thing that's become this, part of a, podcast Americana. And because I honestly just assumed you hit start, you hit end, and you did it. But apparently, you move stuff around to make the story roll better. And if they don't go so hot, some people aren't as giving, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Brendan, like, and he's very intuitive about, like, he knows me like inside and out. He knows exactly my tone when I'm not having a good time, even. Like today we just put up the Dan Aykroyd episode. And Aykroyd likes to talk about aliens. He likes to talk about his vodka. He's a real kind of like he's a huckster in a way, with the vodka and stuff. And he's also a little weird about, like, he just blathers on, and I know, like, and I knew at some point there was no way I'm going to get around this. But I
Right.
did ask a couple of different questions, and I've tried. But Brendan could hear I was a little annoyed, but he was also able, because of my persistence, to shape something that wasn't all this bluster, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not like, a lot of times my experience of them. That's why I don't talk about my experience of them on the air that much, because like my experience is going to be different than someone listening.
Right.
Not because of Brendan necessarily. I could not be emotionally satisfied with the interview I did, but that doesn't mean that anyone who loves the person I'm talking to has ever heard them like that. Just because I'm a little disappointed in my hour-long conversation with a legend, doesn't mean that people are going to be like, oh, yeah, I'm a little disappointed too. They're going to be like, holy fuck, I've never heard this guy talk for an hour. And I'm sort of like, my emotional needs weren't met. But, so I don't bring that up anymore. But yeah, Brendan definitely does a lot of crafting. That's for sure. He's a genius, Brendan. No doubt.
One thing I noticed, you basically do, right. You'll attempt to do some sort of like arc of their life, depending on how old they are, right? Like if
Yeah.
they're really really old, it's tough to, but you go through someone's relatively movie career, and you start in this basic place, like, you grew up where, what'd your folks do, and then you ask about siblings. The one things I noticed, nobody ever wants to talk about their siblings. Have you noticed that? But you still just ask. They go, yeah, I got a sister and brother. You're like, you in touch with them? Yep. Like nobody ever
Well, I
really
think
wants.
like I just had this problem with Lynn this morning, because like I recorded my intro yesterday, and I talked about my life and what I was doing during the lockdown here, and I didn't mention her at all. And she'd been with me 24/7. She was very hurt by it, and like I've become trained over time by women and by people in my life to mind their privacy. Like, their story, even if it's part of my story, you know, I've been told like that's their business by a couple of women particularly. So it's a sort of a habit. And I'm gonna have to straighten it out on Thursday because Lynn doesn't mind. But my thought, once I get in the mic and I'm in relationship with my audience, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. I did all the things I did, but she was there too. She was cooking with me. She was watching the movie with me, but I just said I and not we,
Right.
because that's my habit, to protect the privacy of somebody. And I'm also self-centered.
Right.
But I think it's the same with other people too, is that a lot of times you don't know the struggle of siblings. I know my brother's been through a lot. How much do you want? How much of that is for public consumption?
I've just noticed it's not something anybody ever really goes into. They just seem to brush it by pretty quickly. I don't know if that's a human thing. I'm just saying that it's a question you always ask, and it's a
I
question
really think it's a privacy thing.
but people feel no shame talking about their parents, alive or dead, it seems.
Well, I think that's different.
Why do you think
I
that's
think,
different? That's what I'm kind of get at.
oh, well, I think that, your parents made you. So they are intrinsic to your narrative of who you are. And I think that people think a lot about their parents in relation to who they are.
Themselves, right?
Yeah. But I think that, someone's brother, like, who the hell knows? I don't know how many siblings you have, but, like, my brother and I have gone through hard times. We've gone up and down. Sometimes we don't talk that much. What does that imply about somebody? If they go like, yeah, I don't talk to my brother much, you're going to make, you know, what is that? You're going to make assumptions about that dynamic. So, and that doesn't mean that they're necessarily at odds or anything. You just don't
Can,
talk to them that much.
can
So I
you?
think it's a whole, ball of wax there.
Right.
And also, I think it comes down to, like, if you're a public person, my brother's not a public person, and that's his life. I'm not going to make it public. It's respecting.
Well, if Lynn listens to this, she can hear that when you came down here for a couple days, I was kind of hoping I'd make it into the intro. I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm like, I wonder if he'll mention me.
No,
And you
next time.
didn't, and that's fine. But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's funny that she had the same thought that I did. I mean, clearly she's much more in your life. But like, hey, I'm down here in Atlanta, and I just thought, what if he says, hey, I was down here in Atlanta, hanging out with my friend Matt? That would have been nice. But like, just goes to show you how people think.
Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I don't. I guess I don't really think about it. Like, I feel like I don't know. It's an interesting question about who I am on these mics, like, about what my brain does. Do you know what I mean? Why am I used to doing that? Like, I mean, if I'm on tour with Dean or something, like, I mean, like, I could mention this on Thursday if you remind me, to draw some attention to the podcast. This is a reason why we do this, but you have to send me the information.
Right.
But yeah, if you send me, I'll do it that way. But yeah, I mean, I guess I could have, because we went out to dinner and shit. Are you sure I didn't say my buddy Matt ever?
I definitely listened to the next two episodes specifically. I was like, I wonder if once upon a time, Mark, I used to skip your intros. Once upon a time, when I was in the early days, listening to every single one, and like,
Yeah.
it's like, all right, I'm just gonna get to the guest, which I know you've heard before and you don't take personally. But that ended a long time ago, and now I do listen to the intros because I do want to hear what's going on with you, right?
Hmm.
But anyhow, it's fine that you didn't. I don't expect you to. But it's funny when you said that about
Odd though. It's an odd thing that,
You just
like,
said I was in Atlanta. You're talking
how do I
about
filter? But how do I filter my experience? It's an odd
right.
thing. It's something I will think about.
You were just talking about, hey, I shot this really cool blues movie, or this character I'm playing. That was the focus of what you were thinking about, and
Oh,
now
right,
my
right,
food's all off because the craft services. Like, that's what your brain is mostly focused on.
right. Well, maybe if we'd spent a little more time together.
Well, listen. I think what you said to me last time was, I thought we'd run out of stuff to talk about, and what do you know? We didn't.
Well, we're similar, and it's annoying.
It's right. One of
I mean, that's why you didn't like listening to me do my opening. That's why you're hesitant to why we don't watch particular. Like, I don't really always understand. Like, I have like 4 friends, right? You're one of them for the most part, and like, I do stuff, but like, how much of me can you take? I mean, you have this relationship with me where we go and we eat, and we know each other, and then we do something like this. But like, it's a lot to ask somebody to, like, you want me to watch more of you? I mean, what? How much do I need to?
right,
Like, I know you.
right.
It's a weird thing with certain people.
Well,
Like,
I
Lynn
think
will listen. Like, she listens to the podcast. She listened this morning to the one that went up today, and then I had to deal with the sadness with her being upset about it. And I'm like, why are you even listening to that? I'm in the house. I mean, like, but it's always been a thing with people I know, and people, they'll listen and they'll be like, I didn't know that thing you said out there. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't talk to you all the time. I've talked to my audience, but I don't know why certain things
and
make the cut.
I think, uh, adults in general, but certainly adult men, right? We don't need a
Mhm.
ton of friends. It's not like when you're 6 or 10 or 14, right? You've got a few guys you count on, especially like program guys, right? Like, maybe you don't even
I
see a
used to do a
program.
joke about that. Do you know
Like,
that joke I used to do?
yeah, you only had like 2 guys, and you would wear
Yeah.
out the one
The
guy,
main
then
guy
you
and
call
the
the other
guy
guy.
you go to when you wear out the main guy.
Right. And I think at one point I might have been the guy that when you were out, you called the main guy. Like, I think I might have been the second guy for a very brief period in your life.
Well, the weird thing is, I think we've been there for each other in some pretty dire situations. because of, you know, a sort of certainly program, but also a kind of like similar upbringing, Jewish, whatever. We understand each other on a certain level, but I think we've definitely lent each other an ear during some pretty dire times.
Correct.
Yes, and there's only a few people you do that with. Like I've got a few people that I've done that with, and I, will forever be grateful for that. And I still am in touch with those guys, even though I don't talk to them all the time.
Yeah, and I feel the same about you. And there's other program guys. I might not even see them, but then you see them in a meeting like 3 years later, and they're like, "Oh, remember we used to do coffee way back when? Let's start hanging out a little bit." Maybe you do, maybe you don't, maybe you just text.
Right, but
But
it's weird. I have those guys too, but like even when I see them again, I don't usually reignite it. Like the guys that I have, I've had for years, and they're pretty in. Like I don't see any new ones
right, nobody's right.
being folded in. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Well, dude, you're in your 50s now, right?
Yeah,
Not a lot of room.
I guess that's true. I guess, but no, I've made a couple of new friends in the last 5 or 6 years. Tom Sharpling is one. Um, but then I have people like Brendan in my life. Brendan and I, like, that's a professional relationship. Like, I don't lean on him. He don't lean on me. You know, like
Yet,
I'm
yet
bad.
it's yet it's one of the closest relationships you have.
It's probably the closest, but I'm not calling him up going like, man, I don't know what to, like occasionally I'll do it, over something that, I know he can relate to, but he's a very practical guy, but he's got his hands full. I got my own thing. And we've really honored each other's boundaries like that. It's kind of odd. I feel bad because I don't even, like, I shouldn't, know his kid's birthday and that kind of stuff that coworkers do. But like, even in the shit we're partnered up in the businesses, like he usually is the guy that sort of like sends the thank you notes, make sure somebody gets the car or the flowers or whatever. I'm just shit at that, and I feel bad about it. What would it take? There was a few years there where I'd send this kid a present or something, but then I just think like, am I just a shitty person? And then after a certain point, I'm like, nah, it's just I'm the way I am, and he knows that. So
I'm not sure I know when my third kid's birthday is. I have to think about it for a second. It's September 12th or 13th. I have to the first two I got.
you can ask Stacy.
Yeah, I can't. She gets mad. So luckily she doesn't. Luckily we got married on New Year's Eve, so I never forget that one. That's easy.
Good. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Right, because people having issues with that. But I was gonna. Oh, dude.
What, you forgot?
Yeah, it was right there.
What was it about?
Something about you were talking about Brendan and that.
Not
Oh,
leaning
guys.
on you.
Oh, guys. So I like to reach out to see how you're doing, but when it comes to like episodes, a lot of times I'll just shoot you a quick text like, "Hey, good job with so and so," right? Or I
Yeah.
thought that went great, or whatever. And
Right.
I feel like I assume, and maybe I'm wrong, people are always doing that. So I kind of try to pick my moments, like, oh, like everybody just told them great job on whoever, or
No, not people I know really. And it's so funny, like a lot of times because you're so like, what is it? Like and then we had a little problem with this, like maybe it was the last time I was with you where like I just assume you're being a dick.
right.
And I don't know what that is. Do you have that with other people?
Mark, you and I are clearly very similar in that regard, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to cut you down before you can cut me down, right? It's a defense mechanism, right?
Right.
Okay.
But it's a tonal problem because I don't register it as you cutting me down, but I always think you're being like snide or condescending about it.
I made this I thought like a softball about your act or something. And you were like, you know what, Davis, you've always been a cunt. And I was like, what? Do you remember that? That was last time we were together, or 2 nights before we made up after that. And I was like,
Well,
whoa.
well, because like I think that sometimes like what you deem as just being honest or being okay is coming from a slightly tainted place of your own, you know, however you feel about giving up comedy or
See, I know, and that's where it always goes. Like but you slight me that way. That's what it's always is like, oh, Davis, you fucking didn't make it as a comic. And I'm like,
no, I don't though. I don't slight you that way, but you assume that that's the tone I'm taking, and I assume the tone you're taking is sort of like, yeah, man, it's like it's okay, that bit's okay, but it could be, like coming from, yeah, I get it, I
no,
don't, but I don't slight you,
I think
but
there
I
were a couple
assume that you're slighting me.
I think there were a
Okay.
couple times you definitely slighted me.
All right. Well, we worked through it, didn't we? Do we have to reopen it? I feel
No,
like
no, we definitely we definitely. Yeah, it reminds me of that scene from the movie when it's like, why do we take so long to get here?
Yeah.
30 seconds, we're already there. What's the problem?
Yeah.
Those guys were good. The guys that put a screwdriver to your neck, those guys were good.
Yeah. That guy's got. I should interview him. Whitmere Thomas has got a new HBO special on.
Oh, he's a
Uh,
comic?
yeah, it's called the Golden One or the Golden Child. I think the Golden One. I got to watch it. Yeah, he's great, and the other guy's hilarious. Yeah, he's an improviser.
All right.
Spacing his name.
I think this went great for I think this
Where
went
we
great.
started, the part that was off mic, me going like, I don't know what's wrong.
I almost hit record on this just to get it on the phone because you were like I'm like, is Mark being a caricature of himself now? Like he's really losing his shit over this thing that is so not a big deal.
I sometimes forget that, the sober tool of putting that kind of shit into perspective.
No, trust me, I have 3 kids. I scream at them all the time and then feel bad about it.
Yeah, that's not great.
No, but I'm saying it's over nothing, and then you realize it was nothing. But that's
Right.
what happens.
But you just dumped it into them. You've poisoned their brain with your.
Stop it! You're not going to do that to me, Mark. What what future projects would you like to tell people about, or are we never going to do a project again because we're all going to be stuck
Maybe
inside?
future project. I don't know, man. I mean, I know that the special is on and people are enjoying it. I don't know when that movie I did is going to be out or what that's about.
Oh, is that halted, or had they finished yet?
No, I mean it was in post. I don't like.
All right,
I
well
don't.
then they can work in post. Just work like
Yeah,
one editor at a time, like nobody in the.
yeah, I think so. There's another movie I'm in that was supposed to premiere at Tribeca. I don't know what's going to happen with that one, the David Bowie one. But yeah, the special's on, and the other specials are available on there, and you can watch Easy on there, and the podcast. Yeah, that all keeps going.
Can I ask you? Are you worried? Like
I'm sure you're a
worried?
good father. Don't worry about it.
I'm an average father. Are you worried? Have you woke up a couple times like and gone into beyond general anxiety dread we have and like, oh shit, this really might be bad?
Oh yeah, every day. I mean, the outside of like there's the micro, which is like, am I going to get this thing and am I going to survive it? And then there's the macro, like how long does this go on for? And what if the economy collapses and people who are unable to get reemployed or get to a point of desperation where there's looting and and uncontrollable violence in the streets and the system breaks down? What happens then? So yeah, I deal with that every day.
Well, I want to tell you that I got this co-working place, and as soon as like 2 days after I signed up, they're like, you can't come here. We're closing for 2 weeks, which will probably
Yeah.
get extended. So I'm in this other place, which is like a big tall building in Midtown Atlanta, probably not too far from where you've stayed before, right? You know
Yeah.
Midtown.
Yeah.
And nobody's here. It's great. I'm in this conference room by myself all day. I never have to reserve it, right?
Yeah.
And this morning, there's 4 people sitting in the lobby, and I get in the elevator and the door's open, and I'm pushing the button and it's not doing anything. And it occurs to me these people are in the elevator lobby because the elevators aren't working. And I did have the thought like, okay, it's starting. Like if I have to leave here and go back to my house because everything else is like in it, I had that like, and then I realized like it was like, oh, you have to use the key card now. It was always there, but you didn't usually have to use it.
Right.
But that moment happened.
What exactly was starting?
The police say go home.
Oh.
You can't come up this floor. Like go back to where you came from.
Well, yeah, I just talked to the guy from NPR, who said that they now have to carry on paper, that like certain media, there's kind of state designated in the Department of Public Health order what is it essential businesses. And oddly, podcast is one of them in the media section.
Hooray.
Yeah. But he said they're carrying around written proof. And I'm like, in preparation of what? When they're going to be stopped? When martial law happens? Real martial law? Like right now, it's just sort of like, we recommend.
Right.
And these businesses have to close. but they can't keep people in their homes.
That's what I'm saying. So that's what I mean by this is starting. That was sort of the feeling I had, because it's easy to close all the restaurants, right? But are they going to monitor every building? Are there going to be guys like in the street? Like,
Don't know.
like fucking, what do you call it? Checkpoints?
Don't know. That type of like standard kind of like organizational martial law kind of thing, less frightening to me than just roaming hordes of desperate freaks, armed freaks, stealing shit.
Do you carry firearms, Mark?
No,
Me either.
I grew up with them. I've thought about it, but they are kind of shit magnets when you have them in the house. I used to do a joke about that, about how my girlfriend wanted to get a gun back in the day when I was with Mishna. Maybe she was my wife. She said my wife really wanted to buy a gun for the house, and I was like, "There's no way I'm going to let her buy a gun," because that's sort of like me saying, I kind of want to kill myself, but I want it to be a surprise.
That's really good.
Yeah, I think there was one more connector in there somewhere. I lose the bits, but but be careful, buddy. Stay in touch. Are we good? Everything okay?
I'm great.
You got all this?
Yeah.
When does this go up? Send me all the info so I can, send people there.
If you would share it, it would mean a lot.
I will. I mean, if you tweet it and you tweet it at me and give me a heads up that you've done it, or give me the information, just do due diligence on that shit.
No, I will. I usually, usually things go in the hopper and it takes a while, but I'm going to guess you go to the front of the line. You'll probably be up tomorrow.
Okay, buddy.
All right.
We'll get it out there.
Talk soon.
I'll talk to you later. How do I stop this now? Just hit close?
I'm going to leave you, and you will never see me again.